So the NBA Finals are set, but what if I told you the most important player in this entire series is on a team that didn't even make the playoffs? He is, and you know him well. He is Paul George, 9-time All-Star. He played in 41 games for the Sixers this year. The last of those was on March 4th. But his presence looms large in the finals. In fact, you could argue he is the reason both teams are in it. This is a story that begins in the summer of 2017. The Pacers traded George to OKC. They got back Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. A couple of years later, Indiana flipped Sabonis to Sacramento. In return, they got Tyrese Halliburton. In 2 full seasons led by Halliburton, the Pacers have won 5 playoff series, and they've now advanced to their first finals in a quarter of a century. So that's their story. Now we get back to Paul George. When last we saw him, he was in OKC, but that didn't last long. In the summer of 2019, he was dealt to the Clippers for a package that included a 20-year-old Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 7 draft picks or swaps, one of which turned into Jalen Williams. Led by those two, the Thunder are now 80-18 this year, and they're the youngest team to make the finals since 1977. Now, none of this is meant as a knock on Paul George. He's played well. He's done plenty of winning over his entire career, but it all is worth noting, as is this. In the 23 years since the NBA instituted a luxury tax, this is the first finals in which neither team paid into it that season. So just keep all of that in mind the next time a superstar is dealt, and the narrative is you never get full value in return. These finals are living proof that at least sometimes you do. So that's what I think. Alan Hahn, what do you think?
I think this is 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon NBA style. That's
Right.
exactly what this is. It is a very interesting coincidence, and it also shows you 2 franchises that made desperate moves for Paul George. One, the Clippers, they wanted to sign Kawhi. Kawhi wouldn't sign unless he had somebody, a buddy with him. They got Paul George. The reason why the Thunder got Paul George is because they had Russell Westbrook. He was an MVP. They wanted to put a piece with him. They wanted to make him happy. They get him. So the converse is sometimes chasing stars just to make stars happy is not exactly the best business either.
I guess that's what I'm saying is it is an interesting coincidence at minimum, and that's why we wanted to do it. Is there a larger lesson in all this? Is there a cautionary tale of any kind? Is it, Monica, a sign that the day and age of go out and add a superstar and that's the way to win a championship has come and gone in a league in which we're about to have our 7th different champion in 7 seasons?
I still think adding a superstar is valuable. Look what the Lakers and the Mavs did. But I do think that we're in a position to celebrate 2 teams that did it slow and steady. Sort of, right? Like OKC obviously has done a terrific job of drafting and being patient, but these are still trades, right? Like SGA wasn't drafted by OKC. Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam weren't drafted by the Indiana Pacers. So I think the situation is just more unique than anything. I still think that if you have an opportunity to add a star and it fits, that's still viable and teams want to compete instantly. But these 2 organizations with their young cohort, their friendship, family vibes, like they stand out.
Before Jay, I just want to throw out one thing too. Last year's finals was also a situation where the Dame Lillard trade ended up with Drew Holiday in Boston.
Right.
There's a lot of things that can happen with trades that you have to wait a year or 2 to see the end result.
So I'll be totally honest with you. This is how these things work, okay? We have an idea to do one of these essays, and the idea was mostly the coincidence of Paul George. Yep. And then at the very end, in my notes, it was thrown in, and this is the first finals basically ever since there's been a luxury tax that neither team are in it. And I started thinking to myself, how is that relevant to this conversation? It feels as though it should be, but I can't make up my own mind whether or not it is. JWill, how significant a component is that when you look at the bigger picture, when you look at the trades that worked out here and all the rest of it? Is there an underlying lesson in all of this?
Yeah, I think today, Greeny, the age of stacking superstars is over. I think it's about stacking fit, more importantly. And if you are trying to stack superstars in the age of the second apron, you are building a trap door that can hinder your franchise for the next 10 years. And I think that's what all these GMs and these presidents of teams are thinking about right now. How can I find the right pieces for the right value, for the right fit? Let's just talk about one of the teams in the NBA championship, like you spoke of, Sam Presti, and think about the patience that they've had for a very long time with their ownership. It hasn't been about how do we just win tomorrow. It's about how do we win for the long term, and how do we build the right accumulation of assets to help us be sustainable in the long term. And that's where they're able to find the right fit for guys like Chet, Jalen Williams, and SGA, but also Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, and have the right cap space to be able to build a sustainable trade to get there.
It's actually an interesting note as well that while I'm not going to suggest that no free agents are going to go to Indiana or OKC, it's probably more difficult. It's not my job to figure out how these things get done, but my guess is it's harder for those kinds of markets and teams to recruit free agents and then it is, or to have players demand a trade there than it is for the Lakers, for the Celtics, for the Knicks, that kind of thing. So maybe this says more about how those teams can build championship teams in the NBA.
Yes, but I feel like I have gleaned this from our insiders, Wendy, Bobby Marks and company. Like, isn't this the point of the second apron? To make it more difficult for teams to build?
It's a hard cap without being a hard cap.
These monster teams. And so this then is the byproduct that the league wanted to see, I would say.
It's the Spurs model, if you think about it. They weren't going to attract free agents, so they got great. Then people wanted to go play there to join forces.
Right, and it works out really well when you draft Tim Duncan, and then you have him to build around, and he happens to be that extraordinarily unique star, temperament-wise, et cetera, who wants to live his entire career in that environment. Go ahead, Jay.
Just look at the Phoenix Suns. I mean, it's a prime example, right? Matashibia wants to come in there. He wants to create winning right away. They get Bradley Beal. They have Devin Booker. They have KD, but they weren't able to build out their bench, right? And they've had health issues. But that's a prime example of how the second apron can affect you long term.
Right. That's the cautionary tale.
Do you kind of feel that going forward, he's the same guy to lift you guys the rest of the way, that next level?
Is that a real question right now?
I mean, every time I turn on ESPN.
You just asked me if I believe that if he's the right guy. Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Come on.
So he's frustrated by the question. And look, the NBA playoffs are so unlike the regular season in that literally every decision, every matchup, everything that happens, we micro-analyze, and I understand that. And so if one comes out of this series saying, there are things that I think Tom Thibodeau got wrong, well, I'm having no debate about that. Obviously, every coach makes decisions in the moment, and sometimes they prove not to have been the right ones. The idea that there are people who want to run Tom Thibodeau out of town after what he has done for this franchise the last 2 years, after how they have been dormant, they have been non-existent for such a long time, I cannot comprehend that thinking.
It is the idea that Tom Thibodeau is with Jalen Brunson and Leon Rose. Those are the three pieces that are the foundation of why the Knicks are now relevant again and now in contender status again. Because before that, you couldn't say any of those things about this franchise. They had gone 8 years without making the playoffs. They had been going through coaches after coaches after coaches. He has won 50 games in back-to-back seasons. The last coach to do that was Pat Riley, going back to the early 90s. Getting out of the first round every year. All the things that he's done, 51 wins this season, beating the Celtics the way they were able to do, stealing games on the road to start that series. There's a lot of positives about Tom Thibodeau that people want to just address and say, well, any coach would have done that, which is absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, next season, after a handful of wins, he will be third all-time in franchise history in wins. Third all-time. It is Red Holzman, who won the 2 championships, Joe Lapchek, who's a legend, and then Tom Thibodeau, not Jeff Van Gundy, not Pat Riley. So think about that for a minute. This is what the man has done. And the most important thing I'll say is this. The best player on the team, the franchise player, just walked away from the podium saying, are you serious about that question? That's him saying, absolutely, he's the coach for this team.
Yeah. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that, right? I don't think anyone in this conversation is going to say the Knicks need to make a coaching change and that's how they get over the top. They ran into a team that people, Brian Windhorst said, before the playoffs began, he said the Indiana Pacers are a contender, a championship contender hiding in plain sight. Yeah. The Indiana Pacers and Oklahoma City Thunder are the 2 teams that have the best record in the NBA going back to January 1st. That's why they're in the finals. They had some advantages over the Knicks. They exploited them, and they won. Here's the question, JWill. Do the Knicks need to make an aggressive play for Giannis? Let's face it, that's what the conversation is going to be. Do they need to make an aggressive play for Giannis in order to try and take that next step that this franchise has not taken in now 52 years?
Greeny, yeah, I believe that they should go for GA. But a couple of things. Number one, thank you for giving Rick Carlisle and the Indiana Pacers a shout out. They deserve it. They actually won the series. Siakam being MVP, Tyrese Halliburton being special. And I think, first off, that deserves praise, right? We should be talking about that. Secondly, just to engage in this conversation, like, why can't we question Tibbs? Like, and I get it, guys. I understand that, he's got back-to-back 50-win seasons, and Alan, your stats are okay. It's okay to question your head coach. It's also okay to understand context that matters about getting over the hump. Jalen Brunson's dad, Rick Brunson, is his assistant coach with Tibbs. He's part of the reason why Tibbs is there. I love Jalen Brunson's loyalty. I understand it. I respect it. But it's okay to ask if his style of grit and grind coaching, really not building out a bench, is the right answer to helping the Knicks win a championship. That's why we are here. We're discussing the Knicks winning a championship. It's been a good year, but is it a good year enough to get over the hump? It's okay to ask that question. Love that Jalen Brunson's energy is like, no, what are you talking about? But it's our job to critique whether Tibbs can actually get them over the hump. And I'm not so sure about that, guys. And it's okay if you're not so sure about it. Nobody's overly confident saying that his style or his strategies, just employing his bench over the last 3 games, is the right style or strategy to help them win a championship. I don't see the problem with questioning that at all.
Okay, so we should then talk about this, because that's a good point that it is well made. And he has been a head coach for a long time in a lot of different places, and his team hasn't won a title, hasn't made it to the finals, and there is sometimes the biggest compliment that he gets paid, which is he gets the most, maximizes what a roster is capable of during the regular season, then does not lend itself to being at its best in the postseason for any number of reasons. It is not an unreasonable thing to say. I shouldn't have shut it down. You're right, Jay. What do we want to say about what Jay just said?
I think Jay and Hahn are both correct. I don't think that Tibbs should be moved, but I also think the nature of being a competitive athlete at every level or a part of a competitive organization, let me clarify, because it's not just about the players. The coaching staff is not immune from going back and studying their own tape as well, right? Will Tibbs have the opportunity to look at this series, even go back to Boston and Detroit and grow from some of the decisions, evaluate how perhaps he can have the relationship, or continue, I should say, to have the relationship with Jalen Brunson that it is perceived that he has? Yeah, and part of that is, in this series, you needed to see Jalen get off the ball a little bit more. You needed to see this bench get a little bit more burned. Why did it wait until the Eastern Conference Finals for that to happen? And so if he is continuing to be the professional and the coach that is setting the records that Hahn pointed out, then he should be evaluating himself in tandem with Brunson, his coaching staff, and Leon Rose, especially if this roster is not going to change this summer.
It's always easier said than done. Remove the coach and you'll get better, because whoever the new coach is going to be, who's it going to be? Who's the new coach? I always, you have to be careful when a franchise gets to a place where the Knicks got. I feel like this is the hardest place, because you can go from a team that was a wayward franchise and get a coach that gets you organized. And now you're a competitive team again. You're a functioning franchise. And then you start to build that to a team that can be a contender, which is they've gotten to. Here's the hard part. How do you take it from here and put it over the top to win a championship? One false move can send you the wrong way. That's the thing you have to be worried about. Mike Budenholzer won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks. He's a guy that nobody would look at as one of the great coaches of all time. But he was able to do it because in 1 year, they had the right team in the right moment, and they got there. Tom Thibodeau can do that.
Yeah. Let's play a game we call Is That McNutts with Monica McNutt. Here we go. Monica,
the rules, Greeny,
if someone were to say the Pacers control their rivalry against the Knicks, is that McNutt?
Oh, boy. I live in New York. I obviously work closely for this team, with this team. Unfortunately, it is not McNutts because of the recent history. I think a trivia question the other day, Greeny, was who's put the Knicks out 3 times in the Garden?
Yes.
The Pacers have done it. And then, of course, you got back-to-back results this year. Yeah.
There's no arguing against it. I agree. Now, here's a more questionable one. If someone looked at the total of work and said the Knicks underachieved this year in the playoffs, is that McNutts?
I think this is McNutts. They have progressed year to year. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. If I told you in September that the Knicks are going to knock off the Boston Celtics to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think you would take it. The rivalry, as we mentioned in question 1, the lack of credit for the Indiana Pacers, I think makes this thing a little bit more. But I did not think this season was an underachievement, especially when you acknowledge you added 2 All-NBA guys, and this was their first year together with Karl Anthony Towns, or you added 1, Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson.
Okay, and then let's put Brunson into the last one. If someone said Jalen Brunson can be the best player on a championship team, is that McNutt?
I do not think that's McNutts, and I get it. I understand the players under 6'3" at point guard position have not done it, but I do think Jalen Brunson has the basketball IQ, the character, and the work ethic to be a guy that will break that trend. Now, should he be is a different type of conversation, but I do think that he has the opportunity to be a centerpiece on a team that can win at a high level.
All right, Alan, I'm going to make you the person who actually makes these kinds of decisions. If you're going to, because look, Brunson has done everything you could possibly ask of him and more.
Yeah.
So if your objective is to build a championship team around him, around his skill set, around what he does well, understanding the limitations that come based upon his size and whatever else there is, what is it they're missing? What do they need to add that they do not have to take that last step?
Ball handle off the court, off the bench. You need somebody that can come in and run offense, and when they play next to him, can play him off the ball more. I think that's a very important piece. It was something they had in Dante DiVincenzo, in fact, last year, but they lost in that trade. They've got to find somebody that can come in, play next to Brunson, run offense, and take him off the ball, but also when he's off the court, continue to have the offense run in a flow.
Because the answer to the question a lot of people are going to have is the Knicks need to go big game hunting. They need to go big buck hunting, if you will. JWill, do you believe the New York Knicks should be moving heaven and earth this offseason to try to acquire Giannis Antetokounmpo?
I mean, depending upon what assets you need to give up to, obviously you don't want the cupboard to be bare here and to be strapped for the next, 10 years. But yes, I mean, it has to be a reasonable option because I think that he could be the 1A with Jalen Brunson being the 1B. I would also pose to you guys this. I think the style in which Jalen Brunson plays right now is not the style most conducive to them winning a championship. Not only does he need to be more off the ball, but I think in order for him to have more longevity in his career, you need more of a continuity offense. And this is what I would challenge Tibbs and their style. It can't be a grit and grind where everybody just stands and watches Jalen Brunson. There needs to be some more continuity in which you can play him off the ball and they can keep more spacing. And that starts with personnel. So Leon Rose and company, now that we are here and the expectation is to win a championship, these are first-class problems. Can they build the right personnel with a new style on offense to help the Knicks win a championship is the big question.
What do you think, Monica? I mean, you're going to hear it all offseason. Again, you're very close to the situation. I'm not asking you to put yourself in a position where you're saying, yes, the Knicks desperately need to go get Giannis Antetokounmpo. But obviously, do you think that would work? I mean, if I'm sitting here trying to put together a player to play with Jalen Brunson, and I defer to your basketball expertise, I feel like Giannis would be perfect. I feel like what the two of them do would be a magnificent fit.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Greeny, but I'm with Jay. What's left if you make that move, right? And that is obviously the catastrophic question that is going to be hanging over that potential if it even can happen. But I would say, I think if you can't add, I like this team, and I understand everybody's pointing to the defense in the series with the Pacers. But I think you had more off the bench, and I think it's fair to evaluate whether or not those guys could have been more prepared for the moment by the time you got to the Eastern Conference Finals in terms of minutes played. I think it's fair to evaluate the moments and the adjustments we saw versus the Pacers where Jalen Brunson was off the ball. And I continue to say that Jalen Brunson has played this way because it's in the system. I think he can play in a number of different ways. I mean, the proverbial toss-up was if you switch the 2 point guards, who would be able to still duplicate the success that they had. And nobody questions whether or not Jalen Brunson could be terrific with that roster in Indiana. On the other side, there's some real questions. So Giannis to me is not the only solution, is what I will say.
Giannis has to control this. He wants New York. He has to have watched the Knicks throughout this playoffs and think, I could be a difference maker there. I can help to get that team over the top. And he and Brunson could be what Dame and him were supposed to be in Milwaukee, and it just did not work out for various reasons. So all the things that are there to make it successful are there on paper. The problem is getting the deal done. And I feel like the only way a trade to the Knicks can work is if Giannis forces his way there or asks Milwaukee to work with him on making it happen so he goes to the destination he wants to go to versus to the highest bidder. Because the Knicks don't really have a ton of assets, and you'd once again break up more continuity and once again not have depth and have to wait another year to rebuild all that stuff back. That's the only reason why. This on paper sounds great. But when Greeny asked me what I thought they needed, what I thought they needed is boring. But my big fat Greek wedding, it's summer, is exactly what New York is going to be part of, and this conversation is going to go on for the next couple of weeks.
Jay, I have 5 seconds. Go.
Yeah, just let's remember how many games the Knicks came back from to win in multiple series here. Cleveland is going to be there. Indy's getting there. Orlando's going to be there. Detroit's going to be there. There's no foregone conclusion that they're just going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals again next year.
No, that's for sure. All right.
Wanna try to boast at what I look like. Keep them down, try to wear, I pull up long range. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's NBA, I'm a